All right, are we all ready to start again for the next session?
I think everybody is still with us, and that's great.
All right, I'm excited. Ready for you,
All right.
Chandra.
Thank you. I'll take it away here. Well, we'll get back to it, everybody. The next topic we're going to talk about is what I like to call market reality check. Now, I believe everybody was with us for the first session. I think that's a fair statement. So everybody knows who I am. So I certainly won't, spend any time on that. But what I want to talk about in this session is a lot of us know, we look at the state of the market, as I like to call it. First of all, there's a word that all of us would use to describe our negotiation style and how we are, in a negotiation. And there's also mistakes that we're seeing people make out there. So I think it's important for us to identify, the one word that we all have. But I want you to think about what are some of the mistakes that you're seeing out there. And if anybody has some, I'd love you just to type it in the chat box. If there's anything that really stands out to you that you're seeing like, oh my gosh, there's this mistake that people are really making, especially in today's market. So if anybody has any thoughts on that, whether it, something related to negotiation, what people are or aren't doing, if you have any thoughts on that, you can just type it in the chat. I can tell you in my marketplace, I'm seeing a lot of people who just are not skilled negotiators. They don't have a system. They are kind of buying into this idea that, oh my gosh, well, the listing agent's not going to get on the phone with me and they don't want to talk to me. And, again, part of that dates back to mindset, everybody. But I think we could all agree, regardless what the mistakes are or what's happening out there, it's a lot of scary stuff, right? I mean, it's a scary market out there. There's no two ways about it. So I want to talk to you a little bit today about, in this session, we're going to focus on negotiation, which, by the way, comes from the Latin word meaning to manage, which I think is really appropriate, given that's what we all do is manage these transactions. But we're also going to talk about some techniques and some strategies that you could implement in your business right away that I think will really make a big difference with the buyers and sellers that you serve. So there's really two negotiation components at play here. When you're talking to a buyer or seller or other realtor for that matter, there's really two things at play. There's the substance, meaning what are you trying to accomplish, right? What do the people want? But then there's also the people. And I will tell you, everybody, when it came to, regardless of the market that we're in my early part of my career, when I was much younger, I was in my early 20s when I started, I didn't have a lot of the emotional maturity and things that I've obviously developed through the years. I really just focused on the substance. I was kind of a, go-getter, like considered myself, I got to be a good negotiator and fight for what my clients want. And I really didn't put a lot of attention to the people. And I think that's where I really missed the boat early in my career, because it's not just about the substance, it's about the people. And if we know more about the people, we're going to do better on the substance side. Now, here's the deal. The challenges that we all face are we're working with human beings, everyone, and human beings have their needs and desires. We have different behavior patterns as human beings. And of course, there's emotions involved. People are very emotional in a real estate transaction. Some of you may have seen this old picture. Anybody remember this? You look at this and it's like, oh, look at the pretty princess. And then it's like, oh, gosh, that's not such a, happy looking, that's an older woman, not so happy looking. Well, the deal is it's the same picture. It's just upside down. So some of you remember that it went around years ago, people would share that and so forth. And it just reminds me, it's really all about perspective. And when it comes to the market and what I like to call the market reality, it really is all about perspective, everyone. I remember when I got in the business in the 90s, people were ecstatic that you could get money at 7%. It was like party in the street. I can't believe interest rates are 7%. People were just ecstatic. If you told someone that they were going to pay 7% interest now, they would tell you, yeah, no, I'm not, right? That they would not be on board with that. So the market reality, it really is all about perspective, and it's all relative. But when it comes to a negotiator, and these are all in your handout, as I provided all this in your handout, this part, but an effective negotiator has to be able to develop trust and rapport. You have to be able to see a problem from all sides. And it really is about actively listening. So many of us get involved in I used to do what I call telling and selling, right? I was all about, let me tell you how it works. Let me tell you the way and all of that. And I've done much better becoming a much better listener. So it really is all about actively listening. Communicating effectively is huge. Determining the party's motivations and then really working to create a variety of options for mutual gain. Now, there's two approaches to negotiating. I used to be very competitive. That's one approach. I am now much more collaborative, everybody, because in all my years of studying this, I know that collaborative wins the day. It's really all about collaborative. Now, I know that you've all worked with realtors, just like I have, who are very competitive in their negotiation style, but it really is more about the collaborative effort. And we all have to kind of give ourselves some grace here. I mean, if you've ever been to like a resort in Mexico, if anybody's ever had that experience, and you had a opportunity to like go to one of the local markets there and you went shopping, it probably became really clear to you really quickly that it's different there than it is in the United States, as an example. They expect you to negotiate on the price. And that's very uncomfortable for a lot of us going there because we're not taught to be great negotiators. So here's the thing, everybody, we get into real estate and then all of a sudden there's all these people we're supposed to negotiate with and, put that together with the market reality and serve our clients. And it's like, wow, how do we do all that effectively? Remember, everybody, it starts with yourself. This morning when your alarm went off, that was your first negotiation. You either hit the snooze button and, laid in bed, or maybe you got up and went to the gym or, whatever you did. I mean, that's where the first negotiation starts. It always starts with ourselves. Then we have buyers and sellers that we serve. We add them in the mix. Then we add other agents in the mix. I mean, I don't know about you all, but I can look back on my career and I can think, there are some realtors that I have done a deal with that I could have lived a full and complete life and never done a deal with that person, right? Like it was not a great experience. I just wouldn't want to do it again. I mean, unfortunately, that's the nature of our business. We don't get to pick who those people are always. We have to negotiate with lenders and we deal with that all the time. We obviously have home inspectors. I mean, you've all been there as a listing agent. You hear who's doing the home inspector and sometimes you feel a little deflated, right? When you hear certain names that are maybe known to, maybe blow things out of proportion, we might say, or whatever that might look like. And certainly appraisers. And so we have a lot of people that we're negotiating with. And I just really wanted to share with you some techniques and things that have been really helpful in navigating all of the negotiations with these folks. All right, so first let's start with, there's 3 critical elements to any negotiation. I always think of it as the acronym PIT, P-I-T. Because it's power, information, and time. Power, information, and time. And when it comes to power, everybody, let's start there. When it comes to power, it's things like communicating with other agents, understanding if people are going to be paying, in cash, or is there some kind of financing involved, and knowing a little bit about that. I'm sure you're probably seeing, like I'm seeing in my market, escalation clauses, people paying over list price, people doing things like appraisal gaps, right? I mean, there's a lot of different things that are going on out there. But one of the things that has been really helpful when it comes to the finance piece is to know a little bit more about the finance. Not that we're trying to act like a lender, obviously, everyone. We're not a licensed lender, and that would be out of integrity for us to do that. So we're not trying to do that. But I think there's a really great opportunity to make sure that people are educated up front, whether it's us working with the buyer or the seller. So for an example, on the listing, at the listing consultation. So if I'm sitting down with a seller, just like you do at a listing consultation, I am going to have the conversation with them about finance. That's just one of the things that I talk to them about. And we talk about the fact about the different types of loans. We talk about the fact that people will be submitting a lender letter with their with their offer rather. And I explained to them that I am going to call the lender. We're not just going to take that piece of paper and run with it. That part of my due diligence and part of my service to them is I will call that lender and have a conversation. Now, not to get confidential information, everybody. I don't want anybody to misunderstand what's happening here. I'm obviously not doing that. but I think it's really important to make those lender calls. So let's talk about that for a moment. When I call, let me back up. If I'm a listing agent and I get offers on a property, the first thing I'm going to do is let the buyer's agent know that I need to talk to the lender. And I just explain to them, I say, hey, it's part of my due diligence and my service to the seller. I have told the seller that I will connect with, every lender for every offer that is submitted, not to get confidential information, but just to introduce myself, have an understanding of that lender and their process and where the buyer is in that process. I've never had a buyer agent say, no, you can't do that. I've never had that happen, everyone. In fact, here's what typically has happened in this market. Many times that buyer's agent is helping me get in contact with that lender. There's, okay, well, let me give you their cell phone, or let me make sure that you get connected with them. And I think that's really important, because that buyer's agent obviously wants their buyer to have that competitive edge. And let me just say, on the other side, everybody, when I am the buyer's agent, I have my buyer's lender call the listing agent. They're going to be proactive and call that listing agent and introduce themselves and say, hi, I just wanted to let you know that I've met with John and Susie Smith, and obviously, not to get into their confidential financial information, but I want you to know that they are, good to go. And we're only waiting on title insurance, an appraisal, or whatever the reality is, everyone. I think that's a really great opportunity to help differentiate our client's offer from some of the other, buyer clients' offer. But again, it goes back to education, everyone. I want to make sure that I'm talking to the seller about the finance process, about the fact that we're going to get these letters that come with the offers. But for me, in my opinion, to be the best realtor that I can, I'm not just going to take those letters and run with them. I'm going to call those lenders, and I explain that to my client. It helps them understand the value that we bring. Think about it. That the majority of the public thinks that you and I get dressed up, show cool homes, and make tons of money, right? They don't fully understand what we do and the value that we bring. So the more we can educate them up front, not only about the process, but about the value we bring, the better off everybody is going to be. So now let's talk about the lender call. So if you're not doing this currently, let me just share with you a technique that has worked really well. So if I'm going to call up the lender, I'm going to call them up, and it might sound something like this. Hi, Joe, this is Chandra Hall, broker owner of Colorado Mesa Realty. How are you? And Joe's going to say, hey, Chandra, I'm good. How are you? What's going on? I said, well, I am looking at your name here on a letter for John and Susie Smith, and it talks about them being pre-approved to buy this house, which is my listing at 123 Main Street. And then he'll say, oh, yes, absolutely. I'm working with John and Susie Smith. Well, how can I help? Then I am going to ask John, the lender, what I call the betting question. And the betting question goes like this. Well, if you were a betting man, what percentage would you give their loan of closing? Now, everyone, that question is really effective, because I'm not asking for confidential information, but I am going to get some great information when I ask it like that, because whatever the lender says, I'm always going to question the difference. So for example, let's say that he said, well, gosh, Chandra, I'd say that, gosh, I'd give it a 90%. I'd say, oh, okay, great. Well, what's the missing 10%? Right? So you're always going to question the difference. And it's then, everybody, that you tend to get the best information. Now, again, I will be the first to admit, sometimes lenders tell me things that maybe arguably they shouldn't. But again, everybody, not my job, right? It's not my job to police what they say and don't say. My job is to do the best job that I can for my seller client in this example. I had one a couple summers ago. I called up this lender on one of my transactions here in the Springs. And when I asked the betting question, the lender said to me, Chandra, I'd give it 110%. And I said, oh my gosh, that's amazing odds. Why so high? And here's what he said. He said, this buyer is personal friends with the president of this bank. That house and that loan will close. Now, everybody, was that good information for me? Now, arguably, maybe should he have told me that? Some people might argue that maybe he shouldn't have. But do you think when I went back and shared that information with my seller, did it give them some good intel? And did it make them feel good about that offer and that particular buyer's financial ability and so forth? You better believe it did. And that's the one they in a multiple offer situation, they did end up going with that offer anyway. But I think it's really important for us to be making those calls. Really important to do that. And I really like the technique of asking what I call the betting question. That's worked really well for me. Now, I want to share a couple things about lender credits. In this market reality that we're all working in, it pains me, everybody, when I am here in Colorado Springs and we have a lot of military buyers here that we work with, and I see realtors writing offers for these buyers who need concessions, right? What do we mean by that? They need closing costs and prepaids paid for because they're buying with their VA loan, they're putting no money down, and they don't have the money for the closing costs and the prepaids. And I see these people get heartbroken time and time and time again because they're working with a realtor who is writing an offer that's asking for closing costs time and time again. Now, we all know the game, everybody. People say, oh, well, we're just going to increase the price and then ask for the cost. Well, that's great, but guess what? Everybody's increasing the price. And most people obviously are not asking for concessions. So that doesn't work. So what we want to look at then is a lender credit situation. And what that means, if you haven't been in that situation or had an opportunity to use that, it's where the lender pays the cost. So therefore, it allows a buyer to be in a situation where they can have an offer written without asking for concessions. Now, they will pay a titch higher in the rate, because that's how it works, obviously. I mean, as they say, there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? And so they will pay a titch higher in rate. But here's the reality. To compete in this market reality, that's what they're looking at. And here's the great news. Interest rates are so low that it doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't make a big deal to a buyer, but it allows them to compete in this market. So if you run across a buyer, everyone, or if you're ever in that situation and a buyer absolutely just does not have the money for closing costs, my hope is that you'll remember this conversation about lender credits. Talk to their lender about the lender credit and how that could work. Again, in this market reality, it is just so silly to me that someone would continue to write offers asking for concessions, asking for concessions. You got to know the game you're in, everyone. And this market reality for a lot of us is it's a very competitive game. So we need to bring our A game and we got to be competitive for our clients as well. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about the I part, the information. First thing that I do is I always bring up social media to my clients, whether it be sellers, or buyers. And especially guys, when it comes to Facebook or whatever the social media platform is, here's what I tell my clients. You know what? Anything you post can and will be used against you. Because I cannot tell you how many people I have had in my seminars across the country. It's never happened to me personally, but I've heard so many stories shared about clients who have posted things on social media like, oh, we just made the offer on our dream home. We hope they take it. Or, they're posting things that really give away their negotiating position. And wouldn't you know it, their kids go to the same high school and they're connected on social media. And then that gets back to the owners of the house and it impacts their negotiation. I mean, crazy things happen in this world of social media. You all know that. So I just always encourage my people, look, please don't post about the transaction until it's complete. Then you can tell everybody, how great it was and show your house or whatever it is you want to do. But my job as your agent is to make sure that you don't do anything that would lessen your negotiation position. And there's just too many things that could happen. We don't want to be putting stuff out there for the other realtor or for the other, people, the other side to see. So I think that's an important conversation to have with this market reality. The other thing is you want to have some questions to ask the other agent. Just some questions that when you are able to get them on the phone, what are some things that you want to ask them? Well, for me, if I'm a buyer's agent and I'm calling up the other agent to talk about writing an offer for my client and so forth, the question that I always like to ask is, hey, what's your seller's dream offer? Now, when I ask it that way, what's your seller's dream offer? That tends to get me more information than if I just said, oh, well, what are they really wanting? Or what does it take? Or when there's something magical, everybody, about saying, what is your seller's dream offer? There's a little bit of science behind this. When you ask about people's dreams, it tends to put people in what we might call pretend state, or they're not as afraid of saying, the wrong thing or whatnot. And we tend to get more information. So sometimes when I ask that, people might say to me, well, I mean, gosh, Chandra, I don't know. What do you mean? What's their dream offer? And I said, well, gosh, if they could wave a magic wand and have the perfect offer, what would that look like? Oh, okay. Well, gosh, they'd really love actually a couple of weeks in the house after closing because they're doing a new build and they'd love to have that extra time, or because I'm going to get more information by asking that than I would if I don't ask it, because you can't always count on the other agent to tell you that information. So here I'm now able to put my buyer in a more competitive, in a competitive position rather, in that particular market reality with that seller, because maybe other people didn't ask that question and they aren't writing an offer that gives post-closing occupancy, options. So there's a lot of things that we can find out when we make sure that we ask those questions. I think it's really important to work to get those people on the phone. And let me just also put it out there, everybody. I understand, because I have realtors in my market, just like you do in yours, that are known for not getting on the phone. People say to me all the time, well, Chandra, the listing agent, they won't return my calls or they won't get on the phone. You got to be tenacious, everybody. And it starts with your mindset. If you believe that people will not get on the phone with you and that no one wants to talk on the phone and everybody's busy and the listing agent isn't going to call you, if that's your mindset, guess what? That is going to be your reality. So you got to remember, it starts with your mindset. I go into it having the mindset that I am going to get information from this listing agent that will help me position my buyer's offer in the best possible way. Now, in terms of information, everyone, I want to take you back to your first interaction with your clients as well. I think it's really important to understand that preparing them for the market reality and helping them negotiate in this crazy market that a lot of us are working in, it starts with the first interaction. So for example, when I work with a buyer, I'm always going to start that conversation, and I have what's called a buyer intake form. You all probably have something similar. But the buyer intake form is really important because it allows me to gather information about my buyer and do it in a systematic way. Think about a pilot, everyone. When a pilot gets in the cockpit of a plane, and I don't care if that pilot has flown thousands and thousands of hours over the past 40 years, it doesn't matter. I promise you, they do not jump in that cockpit and say, I've been doing this for 40 years. Like, I got this, let's go. No, they don't do that. They use a checklist, and they're required to use a checklist, obviously by law, but they do that because they know as human beings, we work best off of checklist. So I'm going to encourage you, everybody, be as systematic as you can in your business. If you don't have certain checklists and systems, there's lots of resources out there to get some. Please do make sure that you're doing that. It's really important. Same thing on the seller side. Have a listing intake form. One of the ones, this is a screenshot of part of mine, but many of you can probably see on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a question about not quite halfway down. It's the one that has CPA in it. Do you see it? Have you spoken to your CPA about tax implications? Well, everyone, the reason that question is on there is there was a realtor in California who was sued, and I didn't follow it through to the end, so I don't know the outcome, but the realtor was sued because their client sold a property, and it was an investment property, and they sold the house, or sold the property, and as the story went, the guy, the person who sold it, he was kind of lamenting to his buddies about the capital gains taxes he had to pay. He's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, I just did my taxes, and God, I owe all this money and capital gains tax. And one of his buddies said to him, well, gee, John, why didn't you do a 1031 exchange? And guess what the guy said? 1031 exchange? Well, what's that? My realtor never mentioned anything about that. So again, everybody, we are not people's CPAs. I'm not suggesting that we are, but we are in a very risk-laden business is the best way I can say that. So anything that you and I can do to help with our risk mitigation as real estate professionals, I think is important as well. So having that question, that made me put that on my intake form because I want to make sure that I say that to every single seller that I work with. I'm not trying to be their CPA, but I want to make sure that I bring up the question, because God forbid, everyone, if I ever got pulled on the carpet, which I have not in all my 25 years, that's been a blessing. But if I ever did, I could say, oh, you know what? I actually did bring that up because I use this listing intake form. And I ask that of every single seller that I work with, and I recommend that they do that. So I think it's really important to not only use this to help you be a better realtor, there's also the risk mitigation side as well. One other system that my first broker taught me, his name is Bob Allen. I'll never forget him. He's my very first broker in the business back in the 90s. And he taught me this little old index card system. And basically it goes like this. Whenever I am working with a buyer, let's say it's a husband and wife, I will give them each a card, and they are to write down the things that are important to them in the house that they want to purchase. Now, here's what's important. It's an individual exercise, everybody. So they don't start making the list together. They each individually do it. And then I ask them, star the 3 things that you can't live without. So they each write down a number of things. Then I ask them to star the 3 things that they can't live without. Then we take the list and then we combine them and we talk through why those things are important. Is that the mistake I think that a lot of realtors make, and I certainly did before I had systems in my business, is I would just take what people said at face value and then run to the MLS and start looking for that. And the problem with that is if someone says, well, I want a 4-bedroom, 2-bath minimum, whatever. If I don't start to drill down and understand why they want those things, that's going to come back to bite me. Guys, and here's what I mean. If someone says to me, well, Chandra, I want a 4-bedroom house. The question I'm always going to ask is, tell me about how you're going to use those 4 bedrooms. Well, everybody, what if they say to you, well, we want, of course, the master suite, we need a guest room, and then we both work from home. So we absolutely both need our own office at the house. You and I know that there are houses out there that might be technically a 3-bedroom house, but have the 2 areas for their required office space. That might be a great fit for them. So we have to drill down into what they want. As in, the best way that I know how to do that is we're going to get the information from them, but we're going to do it in a systematic way so that we're not just taking what they're saying and then running and plugging it in to the MLS. Now, on the seller side, it's the same thing, except it's why do you want to sell? What are the reasons that you're really wanting to sell? Now, this was even more imperative, I will say, in a buyer's market, as when it wasn't such a fast moving seller's market that a lot of us are still in right now. This was more imperative in a buyer's market, because sometimes the seller, they would get an offer, and then if it's not exactly what they wanted, then well, no, I don't know if we want to sell. But it's important to bring people back to their motivating factors, and that's a way that we can do that very simply with a very simple index card. As I've used that since the 90s, it works really well. I do it every time, every client. All right, so that's some information about the information stage, rather. Let's talk about the T, the time. Acceptance, deadlines, and anything related to a date, obviously, in a contract is important. But what I want you to also remember is what's happening in any negotiation is what we call the power need dynamic. So if someone has a really high need, they will have less power in a negotiation. So for example, if you and I are working with a buyer who says, oh, well, we've got to get moved and we start our new job in Lawrence on this date, and, we got to get the kids in school and so on. If they have a lot of need, they're going to have less power in a negotiation. So just understanding that power need dynamic, not that we're, saying people can't express their needs. Obviously they need to do that, but just understand that's what's happening. It's no different, everybody, than if I go on a listing consultation and my energy is such that I need this listing. Like, I hope they choose me and they've got to pick me because I need to sell this house and pay my mortgage. Or if my energy is such a high need, I actually have less power with that seller. So we just want to be mindful of the power need dynamic. It plays out with us and our clients. It plays out between clients that we serve, right? The buyer, seller, and those parties certainly as well. All right. The 5 negotiating points of a real estate contract, everyone. I don't teach your contracts, obviously. I don't practice real estate in Kansas anymore. I'm from Wichita. I grew up in Wichita, and that's where I started my career. But I've been in Colorado now over 20 years, and so I'm familiar with our forms and not those forms anymore. But it doesn't matter where you are or what forms you're using. it really all boils down to these 5 points, right? Regardless of how many pages the form is or whatever the contract is, these are really the 5 negotiating points of any real estate contract. The price, obviously, the terms, are they paying cash, they getting a loan, what does that look like? All of the dates related to closing, possession, inspections, loan objection, are there certain dates that the buyer could get out of the contract, whatever all those are. Inclusions and exclusions, right? What's staying, what's going. And then contingencies. So is it contingent upon them getting a home inspection? Is it contingent upon them getting their loan, right? So is it contingent upon them, selling another house? I mean, regardless of what form you're using, it really boils down to these 5 points. And I will share these with my clients, everybody. I think this is an important part of the negotiation education process. And if you and I can invest time upfront with buyers, like if we have a buyer counseling session with them, it is going to be a total game changer for people. And now, as you know, I follow the Ninja system. So we use a 10-step buyer process. That's what we do as ninjas. And you can see that in the book. If you get the Ninja Selling book, you can read about that. But it's a really powerful process because it allows us to talk about the market dynamics and the negotiation strategies before they are in a negotiation. And before, quite frankly, everybody, before we step foot in any house, we're going to talk about these things. So it's really an awesome way to set yourself apart from other realtors. And remember, it starts with mindset. If you have it in your mind that buyers aren't going to give me the time to do that. Oh, buyers just want to go look at houses. They're not going to come and meet with me at my office. I promise you, everyone, if that's your mindset, that will be your results. So I'm going to encourage you to shift your mindset. Come from a place of being a professional with the process. In fact, everybody, I am so committed in my own business that I use the Ninja 10-step buyer process. If I encounter a buyer who will not do it, they are not my client. I mean, I will refer them to someone else. I let them go. I mean, I'm so emphatic about it because I know that if I don't take them through the process, it's not going to be a great experience. And I'm just really emphatic about doing that. The other thing that I want to encourage you to consider if you are not doing this, I think this is, especially in our low inventory markets that a lot of us are working in, one of the dynamics that I've started to do is I show the buyer the market. As in, here's what I mean. Like, I'm going to show them the MLS search results. So if I go and I type in what they're looking for, I'm going to click active, but I'm also going to click pending and under contract. And the reason I do that, everybody, is I want the buyer to visually see when we go look for what you're after in the market right now, there's 18 matches, but 12 of those are already taken. 12 are under contract. That means there are 6 available. Now, everyone, this is a total game changer because if I were just to tell that buyer, oh, okay, well, there's 6 things that meet that criteria that you're looking for. You know what the buyer thinks? Oh, there's really not that much inventory. I think, I'll just wait till later in the year. I've always heard that more things come on in the spring and summer, and I'll just wait. The market will be better and we'll have more to choose from. When they are left with that impression, everybody, what's really happening is they're not understanding the market and the reality. The reality is there is inventory. It's just we don't have a lot of standing inventory, because that's the difference. So doing it this way shows the buyer that there's a market and it's moving quickly. And they need to, kick it into gear if they're going to compete in this market reality. Sometimes we need to have a conversation with them about reframing their expectations. And so sometimes it's a reframing conversation. There's a phrase that we like to use, drive till you qualify. Now, drive till you qualify means, you all know, there's sometimes areas where if they drove a little bit farther out of the main city center, as an example, then maybe they, would be exposed to other options and so on. So that's what we mean by that. And yes, I see Rob saying 7 matches and 7 under contract. I totally feel you, Rob. I totally get that. And that certainly can be the case. But here's the deal. It shows them that the market is moving. And if you're going to work with them successfully, they need to understand the market reality. And then you're going to share with them, here's how we're going to stay on top of the market. Here's how we're going to, help you get, what you're after and in the time frame that you're looking for. The other thing that I would encourage you to do, everybody, is have some things that you put in your buyer packet. I mean, my hope is that all of us are using a buyer packet. It's a packet of information that has, everything they need to know about buying real estate in your area. So it would have the forms. And I always like to give my people a copy of the forms, and I give them a highlighter. And I say, okay, your homework is to read the contract documents and highlight anything that you're unclear of or that you have questions about. I mean, in Colorado, everybody, our purchase agreement is 18 pages long. So to go over that contract for the first time when they have found a house that they want to make an offer on, it's not fair, as it's really not. So we want to make sure that we set them up for success. Let's give them the documents ahead of time. I mean, we do all of our stuff electronically, just like I'm sure all of you do as well. But let's make sure that we give them this buyer packet, give them all the information ahead of time. So I'm using the buyer packet in my counseling session. One of the documents that I put in there is called What Buyers Have Done to Write Winning Offers in Multiple Offer Situations. So it's an opportunity for me to talk about some of the negotiation strategies. I'm not saying these are things they should do, but I'm just giving them opportunities. One of our, the realtors at the group, the home of Ninja Selling, she put together this called Offer Strategies for the Win. This comes from Barb Imes. She's a realtor at the group. And what I love about this is it gives us a visual to talk about the market dynamics. So you'll notice just by glancing at it with the thermometers, obviously the higher up you go on the thermometer, the hotter your offer is. The lower you are, the less of a position, of a strength of negotiation position that you're in. So this has been a really great thing that I've been using in my buyer packets as well, because the majority of people, as 60% of people, are visual. And that means that's their preferred learning modality. That's how they take in information. So instead of just talking about stuff, that would be auditory. But if I can use a visual to show them, that's going to make it that much more powerful. So my hope is you'll take some of these ideas, or if you're not already using something that's visual to help them, understand what are some of the options to compete in this current market reality. What does that look like? And I always tell my clients, you know what? I provide, you decide. As I say that to my clients, almost probably ad nauseum to some people, but I want to make it very clear to them. I provide the process and you provide the decisions, as I am not going to tell people what to do. I am not going to obviously put myself in that position, and nor should any of us. But you know what's interesting? There was a study that showed 55% of home buyers in the pandemic regretted their purchase. Now, guys, here's the good news to that. I'm hoping that they'll regret it so much that's going to become our inventory next. Right? People, they'll start selling, right? The houses. I mean, that's what I'm focused on that for my mindset. But anyway, that's why the buyer counseling session is so critical, because it's so important to do this. Prepare them for the market and the negotiation before they're out there in the mosh pit, right? I mean, it is a mosh pit out there. Like, it's tough and it's scary and it's frustrating, as we get it. A couple other things that I wanted to share with you as techniques is sometimes you have buyers who, we used to call them fence sitters. People are sitting on the fence or they can't make a decision. Well, I will ask someone, if I call you later tonight and tell you one of these houses has sold, which one would you be most disappointed to lose? That's a really great question that opens up a little bit of a different conversation. It helps them kind of shift their mindset. Or I might say to them, if this home sells tonight, are you going to be okay with that? What's your plan B? So sometimes they're just in kind of this paralysis state of like, oh my gosh, should we make an offer? Should we not? I don't know. And that can, help kind of take them through the hump. The other thing that came out of that article that I was quoting earlier, it was in our CRS, Residential Specialist magazine. It talked about having people go through the home more than once, make sure they walk through every room. How can we avoid some of this buyer's remorse that happens in a fast moving market? Touring the home privately, as opposed to, if they can, right? As opposed to like, there's all these people in there. Reviewing the photos afterwards, taking a floor plan if that's available. It's a visual to help them remember the house. Read the seller's disclosure before they write the contract. Ideally, the home would be pre-inspected, so they'd have that information. And the other technique that that article talked about that I've started to do is what they call the sleep questions. The sleep questions are really about having a buyer be able to write what we call a no regrets offer. And so here's what that means. When I have a buyer, and let's say that they're trying to decide, well, if I go to 250, it sounds like based on information you're hearing from the agent, and you've been trying to get me all this intel, which is great, but it sounds like I'd really have to go to 250 to be competitive. And you might say, well, yeah, that's, what it sounds like. Well, and let me ask you this. If you do go to 250 and I call you tomorrow and you lose the house, are you going to be able to sleep at night? Okay, so that's one part. Now, here's the other side to that, everybody. If they say, gosh, Chandra, yeah, I mean, I'd be disappointed. I mean, I'm willing to go 260. Okay, well, let me ask you, if you go 260 and I call you and tell you got the house and you paid 260, are you going to be able to sleep at night? So do you see how we're testing both sides, everybody? Those are really powerful questions to help avoid some of the buyer's remorse that comes in this market reality of very competitive. And sometimes people just get really caught up in the competitiveness of it and the moment, and they're just really kind of swept up in it all. All right, so a couple things about sellers and negotiations. I think it's important to, and I know you all, I'm sure, do this, have a way to show the different offers that they receive and help them compare that, set expectations with them, and certainly conversations that you and I have with those buyers agents. So I'm sure all of you are using some kind of negotiation worksheet. What I mean by that is, just to give you a visual, this is a multiple offer contract summary where it allows us to take the main points of a contract and kind of detail those out so that a seller isn't trying to plow through, like in my case, it's 18 pages long, as they're not trying to plow through, 8 offers of 18 pages each, and, what are the main highlights, and, what am I really looking at here? So as a listing agent, we have to have a way to really bring them some clarity around the different offers and what they each are, providing for them, and so on. The other thing that I've always made sure that I do in this market, certainly, is when I go on a listing consultation, I think part of managing the seller expectations is to have the conversation about Zillow and Zestimates. Now, everyone, here's the deal. You and I, as a real estate professional, you got to know that they've gone online and looked at it, right? I mean, that's just the assumption that we have to make. And here's the crazy thing about that. Most people think, oh, I saw it online and it's Zillow, so therefore it is true, right? So they say that's the reality. Well, you and I know that's not true. So we're not going to badmouth Zillow, obviously, everybody. We're not going to do that. But I will tell you, as part of my system, when I go on a listing consultation, I pull the tax record and I print it, because my tax records, they show a value, it'll say market value is this. I will do my own CMA, obviously. I also use RPR. So I will go into RPR. I want to see what they say the RVM is. So I have that data point. And then I'm always pulling the Zestimate. So I am armed always with those 4 things. I've got them, I print them, I bring them. And if you've ever gone on Zillow, everybody, and looked at how inaccurate they say they are, it's really interesting. So one thing I just want to point out real quick here is on Zillow, they have what's called the active value for Zestimates. When you go click on Zestimates, you'll see active value, active listings accuracy. You'll notice here it says we can get within 10% of the sales price 95.7% of the time. Well, okay, and I just show the national number here, as you can go on there and click on state and drill down and get your area. But the other thing that a lot of people don't realize is there's the off-market value. And the off-market value, from a national standpoint, they're saying, well, we're getting within 10% of the ultimate sales price 61% of the time. Now, everybody, that's a far cry from the 95.7%. And look, most people who are looking at this, is their house on the market or off the market? It's off the market, right? So think about that. I just pulled this $500,000 house, and just to use some numbers here, everybody, what Zillow is saying is, well, we'd say that your house will sell anywhere from 450 to 550, and we'd be right on that 61% of the time. It's like, what? I mean, we owe it to our clients, everyone, to do better than that. All right, guys. And last piece that I want to share with you, I think you'll find this really helpful as we wrap up our market reality session. And that is this list of sellers' choices and consequences. So we put this together and have found it to be really valuable when a seller in this market reality is maybe a little bit all up in their head and concerned about timing. You know, they might say things to you like, well, my gosh, I mean, how is this all going to work? I mean, what if we put our house on the market and it sells quickly and we have no place to go or whatever? This right here, if you were to take this and type it up, put it on your logo letterhead, right, and use it in your seller packet that you work with sellers, it will be a really great visual to walk through a conversation of what their choices are and what the consequences are. So for example, it would just sound something like this. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, it sounds like that you're really kind of thinking through some of the different timing and different options and so forth. So let me offer you this. If it's okay with you, I'd like to just walk you through the really 6 choices, the 6 main choices that you have. And we'll talk about what they look like and what the consequences are to each one and what that looks like in today's market. And then you'll be able to choose which one makes the most sense for you and your family. So I've prepared this document for you, and then you put the document in front of them. And so let's walk through these, and you can feel free to take any notes as we go along here. The first option is we could sell your house first and then try to negotiate some kind of delayed closing or possession date where we could try to negotiate more time for you in the house, but you would have, the assurance that your house, is under contract and so forth. So that would be the first option. Now, there are some buyers out there who might not have the flexibility or might not be open to that. The second is you could sell your house first and do a temporary move. I've had clients stay with family members temporarily. I've had them do a short-term Airbnb rental or something like that. So that would be an option. The third one is you could find a home first that you would be interested in, and then we could write what we call a contingent offer. Now, here's the challenge with that in today's market, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. When I present that offer to that agent on the home that you're interested in, the first thing they're going to ask me is, oh, I see this is contingent. Is their house under contract? And I'd have to tell them that not only is your house not under contract, it's not even on the market yet, right? And most sellers in this market are not accepting of that. So it is an option, but just understand the market reality of what that looks like today. The fourth option is we could connect you with a lender. You might be able to look at doing what's called a bridge loan or utilizing some of the equity in your current home. And it might be that you don't have to sell this home in order to purchase another one. Now, obviously, the risk with that is if you were to do something like that, there could be some overlap or you could risk, a double payment at some time. So you have to feel comfortable with that, but I can certainly connect you with professionals who can talk you through some of those options. The fifth one is you may have considered selling to an iBuyer or an institutional buyer, we call them. And for some people, that is an opportunity where they can just get some cash offers for their house, where they don't even end up exposing it to the market. And, I can certainly help you in that arena as well. We could look at what that would look like and you can decide. And the last one is, have you ever considered keeping this house as part of your wealth plan, like as rental real estate? Now, everybody, it's really powerful to walk people through that. And I see Rob mentioned that Knock and Clever, exactly. There's other companies out there that have options not only about buying, but they also have options of, hey, we'll give you this buyout so that you can go write an offer on a house that's non-contingent. There's so many different things that are out there nowadays, everyone. And I think for us, it's all about helping our clients the best way that we can. Let's not be afraid of that stuff. Let's go and get educated about it and let's bring it up, and let's help people, because if we don't bring it up, then they're obviously finding out on their own. And then I promise you, you and I will not be part of that transaction, obviously, if we don't do that. So as we wrap it all up, everyone, really, at the end of the day, it's negotiate as much as you can for the seller before you go under contract. And you all know that. I mean, anytime we go under contract with a seller's house and that buyer, really, a lot of that power shifts to the buyer, depending upon the contract and how it's written. But we want to, acknowledge that, and we want to negotiate as much as we can before we even go under contract. I think it just really all comes back to knowledge. So kudos to all of you for joining us for the Education Summit and my part in it. I know I shared this before. That's my contact information. If you have further questions or I can be a resource for you, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd be happy to help in any way that I can. And I apologize, I went 4 minutes over. I appreciate you all bearing with me on that for my timing being off there a little bit, but I wanted to make sure I shared with you all of the strategies. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you for joining us, Chandra. We appreciate it. We're going to meet back tomorrow at 9 a.m. And just like today, Rob will send you all a link. And see you then. Janet?
Okay, everyone who registered before February 4th was entered into a drawing to win some sort of our select prizes. Today, our winner is Jacqueline Iden, and you get a basket that I made. And so I hope you enjoy it. It's a relaxing basket, and you can pick your prize up at the LBOR office. And thank you again today for attending our session. And we want to thank Truity, our sponsor, and also our session sponsor, which is Midwest Mortgage. And tomorrow we'll be joined by Chelsea, is it Pitts? One of those two. Fights. And at 9 o'clock, and the second session will be with J-Man, and he'll start at 10:30. So we hope we all see you tomorrow, and have a great day.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Chandra, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks for having me be part of it. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you all.